Good morning, everybody. Good morning, every one person who's watching this in 72 years. I've been thinking about an issue that dovetails from an insight that I had, and I'm sure I wasn't the first person to come up with it. I'm sure someone more eloquently came up with it. The insight I had a few years back was that when I was writing really about politics, and this post or this video isn't really about politics per se, but really about society and how politics affects society. But I was thinking all these years ago, wait a second, it's not only that a conservative or a demagogic figure is coming to town and with fascism and all that means, the brutality and all the things, um, but that it's not just happening in our political sphere. It's not just that, okay, now our nation is the same nation with a fascist leader that usurps power and dictates and controls and amasses more power and takes over the legal system and the voting system and etc. But the society stays the same. No, the insight that I had, which maybe was obvious, but this is we're talking 5, 8 years ago or something like that, where I was saying, hey, it's affecting our culture dramatically, and partly because not only is this political movement going to naturally affect the culture because politics does affect the culture, but that leader was drawing upon these social and economic forces like WWE and his connections to the mafia and his owning casinos and his being hobnobbing in New York and Epstein and all these different ways of being that person embodied, like kind of hunting women like him and Epstein seemed to do, and being a fan of dictators of the past and and current ones and wanting to amass power like they do and being revered like they do and whatever psychological things are going on with that person. I could see that not only was our politics being dramatically affected and being taken over and our legal system and etc. in the land of the free and the home of the brave, but that it was affecting us. And it was affecting us not because we were less free or because people were choosing Trump or because they were lying. There was lying and deception and um, propaganda and all those things, but that it was affecting the way the ways that we as Americans and as humans behaved towards each other within ourselves, and that the I I acted like it was almost like the way I thought of Trump um, and his effect on our politics is more like a planet or a sun or a moon, like a body, and the effect that these bodies in space have on each other, where the they distort space time. That's the whole point of gravity and etc. Um, from that perspective, is that these things pull on each other. And I was saying, gosh, this thing pulls on us like a tractor beam, like a planet, like a moon, like a sun. The moon revolving around the Earth is what makes our tides happen, and it affects our moods and etc. These things have real effects just being there, just spinning around. And so while that person has been in our culture for decades, affecting, practicing, seeing how things worked, and waiting for the right moment to do what he did, the full effect of let's say 2015 and on has been dramatic. So it's been now 10 years that this person has been not only president twice, but kind of the most interesting or the most captivating or noticed figure in our culture. Every single day is about him, whether he's president or not, whether he's running or not, his legal woes, his opinions, the ways he breaks with tradition, etc. So that's kind of a treatise, and so it's easy just to say, well, he affects us and how we behave, but the ways I saw it were insidious. And so one example would be this idea of a zero sum game. The way that he deals with other nations is like, I win, you lose. That's a zero sum game. There's no we win by getting together, by compromising, by playing a long game, by using soft power. It's just I win and you lose. And so all of a sudden, I look around at the culture and I say, everybody does that now. Everybody sees it that way now. And it's not just because a zero sum game is something that that president and that character use in their dealings with other nations, but that he and his have so dominated the culture as to have normalized the abnormal, the abhorrent. And so even those of us who are against that political movement are not immune from the sneaky ways that these negative behaviors and antisocial and asocial um, capacities and behaviors and attitudes and predilections insinuate themselves into the culture, into the society, into the individuals of ourselves. And then the other things going on, I could do this for 2 hours. Somebody's doing a doctoral dissertation on this and doing it better than me. Is that, well, you could say, well, that's fine, but we're educated. Well, no, we're not. And they're, anti-education, anti-Harvard, and teaching the wrong things in schools and banning books and etc. So you're happening upon a generation, or let's say a couple generations of people younger than me that are not very educated and they're not very curious and they don't read books and social media. And I know what social media has done to me, and I grew up in a time without social media and without computers or the internet, let's say, for most of my first 20 years, let's say. So these generations that grow up with a tablet in their hand at 5 years old, they are so much more malleable because the tablets and the screens are propaganda machines. And a guy like me can just put a video up and, let's say, get 1 million views, and everybody's going to think that what I'm saying is valid because it's on YouTube right next to a guy with a postdoctorate, and if there's a such thing in history, from Harvard, who has so much more width and breadth and depth of knowledge than me about such things. And I just happen to be kind of the idiocracy guy who's saying, like, hey, I'm not even the smartest person. I'm an average guy from the world I came from, the time period I came from, but you guys are watering the crops with Gatorade. Maybe we should try just straight water. So I feel like I'm that guy. So as such, I'm saying, whoa, it's not just that we need to fight Trump and Trumpism and demagoguery and stop this dictatorship and vote in the midterms and whatever, but that we really have a societal and cultural collapse that seems to be going on based on my perspective. And so as such, you almost don't know where to plug your finger in one hole in the dike, and then another one, you got your toe on this one, and it's like whack-a-mole. It's just everywhere you go. And so I'm seeing it in everything, in business, in romantic life, in social life, friendships. I'm seeing it in every facet. When I see people at the gym or what have you, things are different now, and things are always changing, but things are markedly different in the ways that we're divided, and the ways that we're divided along political lines. That's half the country right there. And then sexual lines, there's men and female. Just to oversimplify that just long enough to talk about it, there's half the nation. Then racial lines, or then I'm for, sending immigrants to prisons in South America that are really concentration camps, or alligator Alcatraz. So division, or whether we should allow any abortions ever. We're being atomized by the divisions. And the demagogue, like Trump, is a divider. It's because it's a minority party. And so a minority party has to divide you enough to the point where they can barely get the majority, or barely, like he did in the last election, or win the Electoral College and not have a majority. So that's their angle, is division. It's us versus them, culture wars and things like that, where the left doesn't want to do that because the left doesn't need to. The left just says, hey, I'm going to make your life a little better. I'm going to look after you, or we're going to help the poor, or whatever it is, and that's usually enough to make it work. And I won't go into how bad the candidates were for the left or anything like that. So here we are in the second term of the Trump presidency that could last forever, or there could be some battle to get him out or what have you. And I've been finding my life to be overwhelming enough that I haven't really been paying attention to the politics of it because I've been trying to pick up after losses or difficulty in business or um, breakups or things that have been destabilizing for me. So as much as I liked writing about Trump when he was president, leading up to his first presidency, during it, and then after, and saying, no, we can't do this again, and that was really noble and that really felt right, my writing has kind of switched to the personal and to the point of it being about a relationship loss or what I notice in society. So that's what I'm thinking now is a thing that I noticed recently is like how clannish people can be, and maybe that's been growing for a while too. So like in crowd, out crowd, in group, out group, and so I think that didn't used to be that way either. And so I think that we need to look and realize, in a general sense, how is the the planet, the moon, the sun, this body that has its own so much power over us and affects us so much, whether it's because it's in the news or whether this person has such a strong personality or because of the amount of people that he's gotten to follow him into darkness. Like, what effect is it having on me as a person? How is it affecting my thinking? Can I think clearly? And so there was an incident for me recently where there was a disagreement with someone about what happened and who was wrong. Um, I noticed that when I did not acquiesce and do as the person who I disagreed with wanted, which was either apologize for a thing that was part of a greater incident that I didn't I didn't agree about it. I didn't see it that way. And that when I didn't see it that way and agree with that person's terms, which were not discussed, it was just more like you either do this or that. And so I wasn't given an opportunity to explain. There was no communication. And so I made my choice. I said, no, I'm not doing that. I don't agree with those terms. And then I found that there was a clannishness that occurred within, so that group ostracized me. And I thought to myself, wow, that was a really minor incident that got me ostracized quickly. And I thought to myself, okay, I would just as soon please the people in the group that ostracized me because I like them and I care about the person that with whom the disagreement happened, but that I didn't agree with what happened, and so I felt like I was being forced to be dishonest about how I felt about the situation, and that I was being coerced into an apology that I did not believe was due, and to be dishonest with myself, and to be self abandoning in order to maintain my status within that group. And it's not the first time that's happened with me over the course of, let's say, since COVID or something like that. It's probably the second time, and that was also a big deal for me. So I'm finding myself noticing this, and I'm not saying, it's all Trump's fault, but there are so many levels of what's going on in a society, and when I look at this most recent one, there are big similarities with the previous one, and I won't mention the subcultures and subgroups that are involved, but only to say that it's uncanny how formerly marginalized groups can, once they amass power, kind of act the same way as the groups they decry. And so the point I'm trying to make here isn't that any subgroup or whatever has a problem, but that it's always difficult when one isn't looking at oneself as if they were susceptible to the ills and the vagaries of the culture at large in general, and especially to a movement and zeitgeist like Trump and Trumpism and MAGA, and thinking that because I'm against that group, that I'm immune to its machinations and its insinuations into the society and into my brain and my mind and my worldview, and where I think one of the ways that that clannishness happens is through selective empathy. And I've seen selective empathy before Trump was a prominent political figure. And obviously, Trump has been a prominent social figure for, 50 years or something like that. About that, yeah, about my whole life, let's say, especially since the 80s or whatever. But that these things are pretty normal. Like, it's normal for us to have selective empathy. These are kind of tribal things. It's normal for us to be clannish. I mean, the tribe was a clan, and there could be insiders and outsiders. And I imagine there were times where in those tribes someone erred or harmed someone or killed someone or stole or just did something that did not fit in with that society, and they had to say, "Hey, man, we're done with you." So it's not like these behaviors are new. They're as old as we are. But the manipulation of us in order to either intentionally or unwittingly inspire such tribal and kind of guttural behaviors is fascinating for me. And so I sit here and I say, okay, I was just kind of scapegoated. I was just ostracized again. And in both situations, is not to say that I didn't do something wrong or that I didn't play a part, of course, but that I wasn't afforded respect and I wasn't heard in both cases, in both ostracisms. Um, so I'm thinking, wow, this is really fascinating. And as power changes, either the usurping of power by Trump or groups that were formerly marginalized get power, when you see the same power dynamics happening within groups that formerly were marginalized, and you're saying, oh no, that's not what I wanted. I wanted that group to gain power and then be better. But I realized the other day that when I wanted that, that is essentialism too. I mean, essentialism is the idea that groups have certain intrinsic characteristics, and so essentialism is gross. It's racism, it's sexism, it's homophobia. Um, like that, this group is not as smart as that group, or this group is meaner or stronger. I mean, um, kinder. This one is the one that cares for babies, and this one's monster. So those types of thoughts are what's underpinning philosophical underpinnings of racism and sexism and stuff. So what I was thinking of was when this group that's gaining power, I was hoping that once they gain power that they would be better. But thinking that they're better is essentialism too. And so I didn't realize that. It's like, no, they're exactly like the other group that used to have power. You can't expect them to be better. All you can do is hope that we as a whole culture learn, because that subgroup, um, as they gain power, isn't more equipped necessarily to not fall into the same traps that the group that had power was. And so I thought to myself, gosh, I didn't realize that even with my well wishing of that group and hoping that they used power better and differently, that to assume that they would was just as essentialist as to assume that they couldn't, or that they were less than, or that they weren't as intelligent as, or they weren't as strong as. So when I look around and I say, oh my gosh, what we need to do is to have critical thinking. And so my critical thinking made me say, aha, you were using essentialism there and assuming that this group was more noble and was going to be more noble, and they're not. Now, they may, from having been out group going to in group, may have certain insights, either collectively or individually, that they may use and assess um, to wield power differently when they get it, but not necessarily. And so it's difficult to look around and say, oh no, are we just destined or fated to kind of keep harming each other and keep blaming each other and keep dividing and keep typecasting each other and saying, well, because you're in this group, I'm going to have you be the stand in for that group and then thus be a scapegoat for that group. I'm going to treat you like you're this instead of you are you individually. And so, there's an unfairness to the sense of that because you're coming from this group that is now um, non grata, that you're going to be persona non grata because you are affiliated with them. And because of that affiliation, you are them instead of you are you individually. Where just because I'm in whatever groups I'm in, subgroups, cultures, subcultures, that I'm necessarily like them or of them, or I'm responsible for all the ills of said subgroups. And that's essentialism too, in another way, that I can be nothing but the subgroups that I'm in. So these are what I think of the vagaries of Trumpism. And then they could be the vagaries of modernity, and they could be the vagaries of high-tech culture or of a culture that's rapidly growing in technology and becoming unmoored spiritually. And you could list anything, destroying the planet. Um, we have the capacity to go anywhere in the world, and we know all these cultures. So there's maybe a sense that who cares? It doesn't matter. Nothing matters. We left a Middle Ages that was very dominated by religion, with for lots of bad reasons and with lots of bad outcomes. But at least the good outcomes is it kind of kept people in check. They thought, "Oh, I want to have an afterlife, so I'm going to behave." And so those religions may have dominated or killed or controlled too much, but at least there was a sense of people were ethical because they were afraid that it would be bad if they weren't ethical. And now you've got let's say, an atheist world that is liberated from the treachery of some of those religions that held them down, but is also kind of unmoored. And I think people don't know where to find meaning and purpose. And so in times like this, I just want to kind of conclude with there's so much going on. There's so much atomization. There's so much distance, and I'm behind a computer screen and you're over there. And so it's really easy for lots of reasons to want to just go be with just me, or just me and my boys or my girls, or just me and my family, or me and my group, be that male, female, black, white, American, not, conservative, liberal. So it's easy to say, like, these are like in group, out group, this is my team. And the thing is, though, that there are people that you think are on your team that are not on your team, that are not honest with you, that are betraying you, that are, whispering like a Rasputin in your ear, things that maybe aren't true. And so there's no safety in being with men if you're a male, or a female if you're a female. There's no safety in your racial group. There's only safety in who is safe. And if you're safe, then great, be by yourself. And if you want to let somebody in, let them in. But if they're of a different skin color or nationality or sex or sexual preference or political movement, it doesn't make them unsafe. And thusly, it doesn't make your things safe. It just seems that way. And so when we're in times of huge stress like this, and propaganda and so much social change and upheaval and economic struggle and rushing around and screens and technology, and just me saying it was overwhelming. When we're in that, then we want to go down to like where the amygdala takes over. It's like, what's safe? And so it's going to be like people that look like me and seem like me and sound like me, and they're not necessarily safe. And that's the trick, is that critical thinking is a different part of the brain than this amygdala. But we're being constantly propagandized and also, hypersexualized with pornography. And then, again, like Facebook and YouTube are trying to teach you things, but also tell you that you're not okay, and that only the person selling this thing about the thing you showed interest in can help make you okay. And so it's easy to want to just kind of escape into something that feels right and into your tribe, because they're trying to push us into tribes. And tribes are great, like real tribes. Like, hey, we live in this corner of the mountain in the Andes, and we want to be together. And this person hunts and this person cooks and this person's the shaman. Like, tribes, as they were originally meant, are great. If you want to go make a tribe, great. But what I mean is don't make your tribes along these supposed modern tribal lines. Like, it's okay to go into into your subgroup and say, I just want to have I want to go to a women's circle. Like, yes, do that. But just it doesn't mean that every woman there is safe. It doesn't mean that men are unsafe. It's just that there is an affiliation with your groups, or um, I want to, like I want to deal with Americans when I call Comcast or whatever, because it's easier, because it works. But it doesn't make your group good, and it doesn't make the other group the out group. It just means that there's a sense of affiliation, and that affiliation only goes so far. Now you might have a men's group where you're like, oh my gosh, these guys get me. Go for it. I'm not saying don't have a men's group or a women's group or an LGBTQ group. It just doesn't mean that the individuals within your groupings are safe because they're like you in these obvious ways. At your core, you're an individual. And as an individual, you may need to look around at the individuals in your life and say, who is safe, who is good? And that they're not necessarily along these lines of these modern tribal lines. Liberals are the good ones and conservatives are the bad guys. It's not true. And that's a whole other question to get into. So I'm just trying to get people to use critical thinking, not so that they leave or lose interest in those affiliations, but just to realize that those affiliations only go so far and can only take you so far, and that our subgroup of being a male or a female or black or white or Christian or non or atheist or whatever, um, those things only go so far. But at your core, you're an individual, and you can find other individuals that are safe. And so I also hope people realize that they're unwittingly acting in self defeating and kind of coarsening ways, that our culture is becoming coarsened, and that it needs to be a daily endeavor to not fall asleep to the ways that, for me, in my opinion, Trump and Trumpism are influencing your decisions, be it through propaganda, be it through them trying to make you a Trumpist, or trying to show you that like might makes right, or to make chaos, or to another one that people do quickly is that they we don't really know like we're one of the effects of that movement is to try to make us not know what's true anymore. And so they can try it on for size and say, and be dishonest or be intellectually dishonest about events or about what was said or what was meant, because they see it. And, we're monkey see, monkey doing with a madman at the helm. So we're all watching that, and we kind of can't escape Trump and Trumpism. So we all watch that and we say, oh, jeez, that's Machiavellian as shit. I could get my needs met. So we're sitting here in absolute defiance of the person and his policies and his movement, his political movement. And yet we're saying, that really did get him what he wanted there, didn't it? Maybe I'm going to do that. Maybe I'm going to bluster. Maybe I'm going to never give up and say I was wrong. Maybe I'm going to throw my weight around. Maybe I'm just going to sue until the person who said I did this thing gives up. And so that's the insidious ways. It's the monkey see, monkey do, copying these behaviors, modeling. That's one of the best ways we learn. Isn't just like you get taught in school. Here's the answer: is you model someone's behavior. So sadly, we've all been, to a greater or lesser extent, modeling Trump and Trumpism for a decade now. It's huge. I mean, it's amazing how much time has flown by. So for 10 years, he's been the dominant figure in the culture. And what I'm trying to say is, if you think that you're not becoming like him and them in that 10 years, you're fooling yourself. and you've got to fight it with everything you've got, because what it's doing is dehumanizing you and helping you, and dehumanizing you, making you less human, making you less empathetic, and it's also helping you to dehumanize those you disagree with. And so ostracizing and scapegoating, those things are dehumanizing to someone. They're designed to make that person less human. You're outside of my circle of empathy now. And so I've had that happen a couple times to me in, again, in the last 5 years, in situations where I was misunderstood, misrepresented, not allowed to speak my opinion, and then cut out of groups. And in one of the cases, it didn't matter as much because it wasn't really like my group to begin with. But it was clear that, and gossip is definitely a part of it, and gossip's an old thing. So that loss was just like, well, that's not really my in group, my soul group. But the second one was more profound because it was people that I cared more about, and shared more, and so it was like, oh, this one packs a little more punch this time because these are people I care about, and I want these people to like me and approve of me, and etc. So that sense of being ostracized is always painful. And my point wasn't to say that Trump made them do it or that I had no behavior involved, but it wasn't appropriate. The action was not appropriate to the crime or something like that. And so what I did in the second one, instead of like I did in the first one, like the first one I was like sad and mad and like trying to like make my point. In the second one, I was like, well, I know what I know, and I'm going to honor myself and not ostracize myself. And it was difficult because part of the reason why I got ostracized was because I would not play along with what the group wanted, because I knew better and I was honoring my inner child, or not self-abandoning, or whatever it was. And so I paid the price to be ostracized. And so we do pay the price when we take care of ourselves, but we also pay the price when we don't ostracize, um, when maybe a group wants us to. And we may need to leave a group that ostracizes, or at least not go along with the ostracizing. And so to be an individual means that we don't necessarily do what the group does. And so, or see who's doing what within that group. So groupthink is a big part of Trumpism and fascism and such movements. So as much as we don't want to think about politics, and we don't want to, it's so negative, you have to notice what's going on, or it gets you and it slips in and starts taking you over. And the same way your attachment style can take you over, or the same way addictions can take you over. And how did Trumpism take over our dads and moms? More our dads, or our grandparents, for some of you that are younger. Like, wait a second, this person wasn't like this. Well, it's doing it to them. So just because you completely disagree with the politics of it, and voted for someone else, I voted Marianne Williamson. So okay, but that doesn't mean that you're impervious to the insinuation of what that's doing to our culture, and the degradation of our culture. So I hope people will look and say, like, what am I, like, how was it that, what happened in this social thing, or what's going on in my relationship? How was it that I shut this down, or I didn't accept that person? Or instead of patting ourselves in the back and virtue signaling, like, hey, I didn't vote for Trump, or I'm against this, or whatever you might think, it's like, how is he getting in? Okay, cool, I didn't vote for that person. I'm against January 6th. I want women's rights, and etc. But what subtle and insidious ways has this come into my life and made me judgmental, made me xenophobic, or in group, out group, black and white thinking? What fallacies am I employing? And the one I pointed out earlier was just this zero sum game. I win, you lose. I've got to win. You've got to lose in order for me to win. And that's not great for race relations, um, or sex, not sex or sexuality, but like men and women. Like the zero sum game doesn't help heal. That's not how we connect. That's not how we grow. That's not how we expand rights. And so it's easy when you're looking at a political movement like that to say, well, if you can't beat them, join them. If you join them, then we're really in trouble. So, this is like going down a mountain, in a runaway train here. How do we get this thing back on a rail that goes back up again? So we're having, a virtuous cycle instead of a downward spiral. So it's not by employing the tactics of the other group. That those tactics are only lead downward. Zero sum game only leads downward. So we have to be better. We have to be vigilant against the influences of such a movement on our brains and our minds and our souls and our groups and our families and our affiliations and our companies and our groups. And so, if you're in a men's or women's group, you have to notice if you're starting to become an anti the other group, even in the slightest way, overgeneralizing about said groups. And then, like where a men's group could turn into an incel group quickly, blaming women for all their troubles and stuff. So it's really easy to fall for this and just start doing that thing because the grossest and ugliest and meanest and most outspoken and glib and controversial people are the ones that are running the country or that have the talk show or whatever. So it's just, you have to be in it, but not of it. And so, how can we as individuals say, wait a second, I'm playing their game? Their game leads downhill, and my game's going up. So, my game isn't against whole subgroups of the culture. Even if some of those subgroups might have historically been, um, committed crimes, or even if certain of those subgroups have made choices that have endangered our rights. Like we cannot dehumanize even those who are dehumanizing us. We have to be better, and we have to take power back and re-educate the nation and show people like what love is about and expand freedom again. It's not going to be through um, vilifying anyone except for those who are actually being villains, actually committing crimes, actually trying to usurp your power. Like, literally, we should vilify Donald Trump and his cabinet and those people that are doing that. But people that have been hoodwinked, you know, we have to have compassion. We have to pick up the pieces and have a country again. So I hope that message helped. I needed to say it. Have a great day.